My name is Helen Parker, though everyone in our small town used to call me Auntie Helen. I've lived long enough to know that life doesn't always turn out the way you plan. Sometimes, the people you trust the most are the ones who break you in ways you never thought possible. I've seen love blossom and I've seen it rot. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the day I caught my husband with my son's fiancée. Thomas and I had been married for 34 years. He wasn't perfect, but he was my partner, my companion, my friend through the storms. We raised one son, James, who had always been the light of our lives. From the day he was born, I swore I'd give him everything I never had: a safe home, a stable family, and two parents who loved him beyond measure. I thought I'd succeeded. I thought we were a normal, happy family. But life has a cruel way of showing you the cracks you've been ignoring. It all started a year ago when James introduced us to Sophia. She was young, maybe 24, with soft brown hair and a shy smile that could light up a room. She was the kind of girl you couldn't help but like: polite, gentle, a little nervous around us, but her eyes sparkled whenever she looked at James. I could see love there. Real love. James had been working as a mechanical engineer in Seattle, and Sophia was studying interior design. They'd met at a coffee shop near the university. The first time he brought her home, Thomas couldn't stop talking about how bright and beautiful she was. I remember teasing him, saying, "Thomas, don't scare the poor girl with your compliments." He laughed, and I didn't think much of it. After all, my husband had always been friendly, the kind of man who made everyone feel at ease. Or at least, that's what I wanted to believe. Sophia became like family quickly. She'd call me Mom, and I'd help her plan little surprises for James. On weekends, she'd come over and cook with me, humming softly while chopping vegetables. I loved her like the daughter I never had. Watching her and James together made me believe that maybe, just maybe, my life had been worth something. I had raised a good man who knew how to love. When they announced their engagement, I cried tears of joy. I remember standing in the middle of the living room, watching James slip the ring on her finger, and thinking, this is what happiness looks like. But behind every perfect picture, there's a shadow you can't see until it's too late. After the engagement, Thomas started acting strange. He became distant, quieter than usual. Sometimes I'd catch him staring into space or scrolling through his phone late at night. When I asked what was wrong, he'd just smile and say, "Work's been stressful, Helen. Don't worry." I wanted to believe him, so I did. You don't question the man you've shared a lifetime with, not when your heart trusts him blindly. Then there were little things. Sophia started visiting more often, even when James wasn't around. She'd say, "Oh, James told me to drop off his mail," or "I just wanted to check on you, Mom." Sometimes, she'd come in looking nervous, her hair slightly messy, her voice shaky. I thought maybe she and James were arguing, young love, after all. I never suspected anything more sinister. Until one afternoon in early spring. I had gone to the market for groceries, and as I drove back home, I realized I'd left my wallet at the counter. I turned around halfway, annoyed at my forgetfulness. It took me about 15 minutes to retrieve it and return home. But when I stepped into the house, I noticed something odd. The front door was slightly ajar, and Thomas's car was still in the driveway. I frowned. He was supposed to be at work until evening. I pushed open the door and called out, "Thomas?" No answer. I set the grocery bag on the counter and was about to head upstairs when I heard it, a soft sound, like laughter, muffled and close. I froze. It was coming from James's old bedroom, the one we'd recently started redecorating for when he and Sophia visited. My heart began to race, but I brushed it off. Maybe Thomas was fixing something in there. Maybe he was on the phone. But then, I heard Sophia's voice. Clear as day. "We shouldn't be doing this," she whispered. My breath caught in my throat. I stood rooted to the spot, every muscle in my body tightening. Thomas's voice came next, low and steady. "You know I can't stop thinking about you, Sophia." My stomach twisted violently. My knees went weak. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming, some horrible, cruel dream. But the sounds that followed shattered that illusion completely. I didn't scream. I didn't storm in. I just froze. My mind went blank. My heart broke silently inside my chest. When I finally found the strength to move, I backed away quietly, tears streaming down my face. I walked out of the house like a ghost, got into my car, and drove aimlessly for hours. I ended up by the lake, the same lake where Thomas had proposed to me 35 years ago. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, trembling like a leaf. How could he? How could she? Of all people, my husband and my son's fiancée. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed at a motel, unable to face either of them. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, trying to make sense of it all. I thought about James, my sweet boy, so full of love and trust. How would I tell him? Should I tell him? Or would I destroy his life with the truth? When I finally returned home the next morning, Thomas was in the kitchen making coffee like nothing had happened. "Where were you last night?" he asked casually, as if he hadn't shattered our marriage hours earlier. "I needed air," I replied flatly. He looked at me, confused, maybe suspicious. But he didn't press. Sophia didn't show up for a few days after that. When she finally did, she avoided my eyes. Her hand shook as she handed me a box of cupcakes. "I baked these for you, Mom," she said softly. I wanted to throw them at the wall. Instead, I smiled weakly and said, "Thank you, dear." I was drowning in secrets, choking on lies. Every time Thomas touched me, I felt sick. Every time James mentioned Sophia's name, my heart shattered a little more. I kept telling myself to wait, to think, to not act on anger. But each passing day became unbearable. The final straw came 3 weeks later. It was a Sunday afternoon. I had gone into the attic to look for some old photo albums when I found a scarf, Sophia's scarf. Pink, silk, embroidered with her initials. I'd seen her wear it before. It smelled faintly of her perfume and something else, Thomas's cologne. I sat there on the dusty floor, holding that scarf like a piece of evidence in a murder case. Because in a way, it was. It was proof that my marriage was dead. That night, I confronted Thomas. He was sitting in the living room, watching TV, pretending to be the loving husband I thought I knew. I stood there for a long time before speaking. "How long has it been going on?" He looked startled. "What are you talking about?" "You and Sophia," I said, my voice trembling but steady. "How long?" He blinked, and for a second, I saw guilt flash in his eyes. Then he sighed, rubbed his temples, and said, "Helen, it's complicated." My chest tightened. "Complicated?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You slept with our son's fiancé, Thomas." "There's nothing complicated about that, it's disgusting." He stood up, trying to calm me. "Helen, please. It was a mistake. It just happened." "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly, tears spilling down my cheeks. "You don't accidentally fall into bed with someone, Thomas. You made a choice." He didn't deny it. He just stood there, defeated, his shoulders slumped. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone," he murmured. "It wasn't supposed to go that far." I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit him, to make him feel the pain clawing at my insides. But instead, I whispered, "Does James know?" "No," he said quickly. "And he can't. It would destroy him." I stared at him, disgusted. "You already destroyed him. He just doesn't know it yet." I left him standing there and went to my room, locking the door behind me. I cried until my body ached. I thought of James, of his laughter, of the way he looked at Sophia like she was the sun. And then I thought of what that truth would do to him. That night, I made a decision that would change all our lives. I wasn't going to tell James, not yet. But I was going to make sure Sophia never married my son. The next day, I called her and asked to meet privately at a cafe outside town. She came, looking pale and nervous. When she sat down, I could barely look at her. "You know why I asked you here," I began. Her eyes filled with tears. "Helen, I'm so sorry," she whispered. It started with harmless conversations. I didn't mean for it to happen." "Then why didn't you stop?" I asked coldly. "Why did you keep coming to my house, smiling at me, calling me mom while you were sleeping with my husband?" She broke down crying, covering her face. "I don't know." I was confused. "Thomas, he made me feel seen, understood. I know it's no excuse, but I didn't know how to stop." I looked at her for a long time. She was young, foolish, and lost. But I wasn't going to let her destroy my son's life. "You're going to end things with James," I said firmly. "Today. You'll tell him you're not ready, or that you've met someone else. I don't care what story you use, but you will not marry him." She looked horrified. "Helen, please, he'll be heartbroken." "Yes," I said softly. "But heartbreak heals. Betrayal doesn't." She nodded slowly, tears still streaming. I left without another word. That night, she called James and ended the engagement. He was devastated, of course. He came home in tears, asking what he'd done wrong. I held him as he cried, biting my tongue until it bled. I couldn't tell him the truth, not yet. Not when he still loved her so much. Thomas, on the other hand, grew distant. Maybe it was guilt, maybe shame. But our marriage was already dead. We lived under the same roof, strangers bound by silence. Weeks turned into months. James eventually moved to another city for work, trying to start over. Sophia disappeared from our lives, or so I thought. Until one afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Sophia. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in shaky handwriting. "Dear Helen," it began. "I'm writing to say thank you. You were right. What I did was unforgivable, and I'll carry that guilt forever. But you also saved me from becoming someone I'd hate. I've moved away, started fresh, and I'm trying to make something of my life. Please tell James that I'll always wish him happiness. And tell Thomas I forgive him." I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I burned it. Some things are better left to ashes. But that night, something inside me broke loose. The anger, the bitterness, it started to fade, replaced by something else. A quiet strength. I realized I couldn't keep living in pain. I had to let go. Not for Thomas, not for Sophia, but for myself. After Sophia's letter burned to ashes in the fireplace, I sat watching the smoke rise until it disappeared completely. That was the moment I decided I couldn't live as a ghost anymore. For months, I had existed without really being alive, eating without tasting, sleeping without resting, smiling without meaning it. But something about that letter made me realize that forgiveness wasn't about letting someone else off the hook. It was about freeing myself from the chains of what they did. The next morning, I made myself a cup of coffee and looked around the house that had once felt like home. The pictures on the walls, the couch where we used to laugh, the kitchen where I'd cooked thousands of meals. It all felt hollow now, like a museum of memories I didn't want to visit. Thomas came down the stairs, still wearing the robe I bought him for our 30th anniversary. His hair had grayed more in the last few months, and there were deep lines under his eyes. He looked at me cautiously, as if unsure whether to speak. "Morning," he said quietly. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at him, really stared, for the first time in a long while. There was a time when I loved that man with every fiber of my being. We built a life together, raised a son, faced hardships. But now, when I looked at him, I didn't see the man I fell in love with. I saw a stranger wearing his face. "Thomas," I finally said, setting down my mug. "I want a divorce." His eyes widened. "Helen, please don't do this. We can fix it." "No," I interrupted softly but firmly. "We can't fix something that died a long time ago." He took a step closer. I made a mistake, I know that. But you can't just throw away 34 years of marriage. I looked him in the eyes and said, you did that when you chose her. Silence filled the kitchen like smoke, suffocating but necessary. He didn't speak again. Sophia rarely came, but I didn't blame her anymore. She had made her choices, and time would teach her what it teaches us all: every action comes with its echo. One autumn evening, the wind danced through the golden trees, carrying the smell of pine and rain. I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, thinking about how far I'd come from the woman I was the day I found out. I had been broken, yes, but broken things can become beautiful again when light passes through their cracks. Just then, a familiar car pulled into the driveway. My heart skipped when I saw Thomas step out, his hair now completely gray, his frame thinner, his walk slower. For a moment, I just watched him. The man I had once loved so fiercely, the man who had once destroyed everything we had. He looked up at me, eyes full of hesitation. "Helen," he said softly, his voice trembling. "May I come in?" I nodded. "Of course, Thomas." Inside, the air felt heavy with memory. He took off his hat and sat across from me, his hands shaking slightly. "You look well," he said quietly. "Peaceful." "Peace comes when you stop holding grudges," I replied. He nodded, eyes fixed on his hands. "I didn't come to ask for forgiveness. I needed to see you. There's something I should tell you." I waited, the sound of the clock ticking between us. He took a deep breath. "I'm sick, Helen. The doctors don't think I have much time left." The words hit me like cold rain. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I reached across the table and gently took his hand. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Truly." He looked up, his eyes wet. "You have no idea how many nights I've thought about what I did. About how much I hurt you. And James. I destroyed the only family that ever truly loved me." His voice cracked, and for the first time in decades, I saw the man he used to be, the one who made me laugh in the rain, who held me close under starlit skies. "Thomas," I said softly, "you don't have to carry that guilt anymore. I forgave you a long time ago. Not for you, for me. Because holding on to pain only keeps you in the past." His shoulders shook, and he nodded, tears running down his face. "I don't deserve that kindness." "Maybe not," I said gently. "But kindness isn't about deserving. It's about freeing yourself." He smiled faintly, a weary, grateful smile. "Thank you, Helen. You always had the kindest soul." When he left that night, I stood by the door watching him walk down the path until he disappeared into the cool mist. I felt no anger, no bitterness, only peace. That was the last time I saw him alive. A few months later, James called to tell me that his father had passed quietly in his sleep. I sat in silence for a long time after that call, tears falling softly but not from pain. They were tears of release. I prayed that wherever Thomas was, he had finally found the peace that had eluded him in life. Days turned into weeks, and life found its rhythm again. I began volunteering at the local community center, helping young women rebuild their lives after heartbreak or loss. Many of them would sit across from me, their eyes swollen from crying, their voices trembling as they asked, "How did you survive what you went through?" I'd smile softly and tell them the truth. You survive one day at a time. You stop asking why and start asking what. What can I learn from this? What can I grow into? What can I forgive? I never pretended it was easy. But pain, when faced with grace, becomes the soil where strength takes root. Years later, on a summer morning, James brought his little boy, Noah, to visit. He was 5, full of life and curiosity, running through the yard chasing butterflies. Watching him made my heart full in a way I hadn't felt in years. "He's beautiful," I told James. "He has your eyes." James smiled. "And your patience." We sat together on the porch, sipping lemonade as the sun dipped low. After a while, he turned to me and said, "Mom, do you ever regret forgiving Dad?" I looked out over the water, watching the ripples catch the light. No, I said finally. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, it just releases its hold on your future. If I hadn't forgiven him, I'd still be living that same day over and over in my heart. And that's no way to live. James nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. I think you're the strongest person I know. I smiled softly. Strength isn't about never breaking, sweetheart. It's about learning how to rebuild. That night, after they left, I sat on the porch again, the stars glowing like tiny lanterns above me. The lake shimmered in the moonlight, quiet and endless. I thought about all the versions of myself I had been, the wife, the mother, the betrayed woman, the survivor. And realized they had all led me here, to this peace. I whispered a quiet prayer into the night, not for anyone else this time, but for myself. Thank you, I said, for giving me the strength to endure, and the wisdom to let go. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called, and I felt the cool air brush my face. It carried with it the scent of wildflowers and the faint echo of laughter from long ago. Life, in all its pain and beauty, had come full circle. And as I closed my eyes, I finally understood the greatest victory isn't in avoiding heartbreak, but in facing it with an open heart and still finding the courage to love again. Please like and subscribe my channel.